just coming from the massive MIMO part. I mean, like, one important thing about massive MIMO is the ability to choose what we call cell shapes, right? Which is basically how the beam forming is spread around in the cell coverage. So I'll give you an example. Like, Ericsson radio provides you a choice of 12 cell shapes as of today, right?
Right.
And then if you think about how many frequency layers that you have for massive MIMO, multiply this by the number of sites, multiply this by 12 number of shapes, and you would like, for example, to optimize an area in London. How many probabilities that you have out of that? It goes exponentially quite fast.
Yeah.
So
that'll be where AI obviously has a big role to play.
Exactly. And
hello and welcome to another Telecoms.com podcast. Another one where we're back on the beers.
Your voice went very high then.
My voice sounded very high. I just sat on something as we started recording. We could. Well, I didn't bring any glasses. We can't get into Luke's Connemara whiskey. We'll see. Maybe we just neck it out of the bottle. So before I go any further, I'm delighted to say we've got a special guest. We don't often get people from Ericsson, so I'm delighted to welcome Ibrahim Eldiftar.
Yes, you got it.
I was
right.
just practicing his surname before we started recording. And Ibrahim, you live in southern Spain, is that right?
Yes, in lovely Malaga.
But your name is from Egypt?
Yes, I am originally from Egypt, yes.
Cool.
And the name is mix of Arabic and Turkish.
Right, okay, so it's not like just straight up Egyptian name.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how long have you been living in Spain?
Close to 3 years now.
Okay, so that must have been my mistake. I thought I detected a slight Spanish accent in your voice, but that's just me imagining it.
No, I'm very bad at Spanish. My Spanish is just like, gracias and sí and no.
Okay.
So it's like,
Not a lot of overlap between Spanish and Egyptian linguistically.
It's actually a lot of overlap with Arabic.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Of course, because they were there.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, exactly.
Like words like algebra and all that have been coming into.
It's like saying, do you speak Mexican?
Well, do you know some countries do have their own, but you're right. It's just Arabic is the language that's speaking.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, well done.
Athukar or something like sugar.
My
Is
mistake.
Athukar.
Athukar comes from sukkar in Arabic, which is sugar actually in English. And actually you see the same root coming in different languages. Yeah.
You get some other weird ones, like my wife's family's language is Farsi.
Right.
But their word for thank you is merci.
Okay.
Yeah.
Isn't that weird?
I only know one word in Arabic.
So which way around does that work?
It's not a good one.
I can teach you a lot of good ones.
It starts with sharmu.
Right. I don't know what he's talking about, but I assume it's rude.
I abstain from
It'll be something along the lines of fuck off, I imagine. Welcome, Ibrahim.
Thank you.
And thanks to Carl, who's in the background, for arranging it. Carl's there to chuck his notebook at your head if you say something wrong. No, he's not. Carl's just spectating. We sometimes have spectators. We got to give a shout out to Gordon from Ericsson, who's also here, but our little studio is so small.
We've shot him outside.
We've just sort of relegated him to
the door
to the office. But we'll buy him a beer after to make up for it.
Can we ask Ibrahim who built the pyramids?
I mean, of course, ancient Egyptians.
But how?
I mean,
you get into Rogan stuff.
That's actually sculptured. I mean, like you will see how they have wrote it. It was written actually, but if you read calligraphy, I mean, like you will understand how was that built.
Mass slave labor.
Yeah, but still, it doesn't explain.
There was no physical AI at this time.
There was no physical. They're very good engineers, and they had lots of
physical AI. It's come up again, Ian. I keep winning our bet.
Well, it has actually come up on the. It did come up on the Nokia call as well.
Right.
So I've been twice wrong because I said there's no way that anybody in telecom is going to start talking about physical AI this year just because you heard it at CES, and then Boya Echo mentioned it on the call.
You underestimate the power of the buzzword.
And I think Justin Hotard said it as well. So I'm completely wrong. The CEOs of two big European vendors have said it. So
I keep messing with your little device there. Nope. Yeah, my assumption is just based totally on observation over the years of how buzzwords tend to perpetuate themselves. Yeah. That's all it is. Cool. Before we get into finding out more about Ibrahim's day job and all that sort of thing, do we have any other opening bollocks to cover? We got lots of nice feedback from our last pod with Luke. Lots of people going, Jesus Christ, for a 23-year-old, he certainly knows a lot of stuff. I And I even, look, Carl, I even tried the odd Irish accent once or twice on the pod, to my shame. You heard.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm getting unequivocal thumbs up from Carl there. But we haven't been up to anything else much during the week, have we?
I haven't been anywhere for work.
I haven't been anywhere, so we might as well just crack on with it. We don't have to have a protracted opening bollocks.
Look at that, under 5 minutes.
Yeah. I know.
Yeah.
So, as I'm sure you know, Ibrahim, that the whole format of this pod's very organic and spontaneous. It's just evolved over the years. And I just noticed that I tended to spend about sort of 10 or 15 minutes just banging on about nothing in particular to start, so I just call it opening bollocks. But that doesn't mean I have to, and I won't. Before we go any further, I'm delighted to announce that this podcast has a sponsor. Unperturbed by our unorthodox style, Cohere Technologies has decided to take the plunge. For any listeners that missed our previous pods with its CEO, Cohere is the innovator behind Universal Spectrum Multiplier software for 4G and 5G, and Pulsone technology for 5G and 6G coexistence, ISAC and NTN. Thanks a lot, Cohere. Your support is much appreciated. So I'm going to get straight into it. You've got quite a lot going on in your job title, Ibrahim. Why don't you tell us your job title and tell us what it means in normal language?
Okay, so it's Head of Cognitive Software and Services Solution Line.
Cognitive Software and Services Solutions. What are they?
What does this exactly mean is that I'm basically responsible for Ericsson's portfolio for RAPs and autonomous networks, as well as services for network planning and optimization.
Okay. And, I mean, I didn't think we'd get there so quickly, but I'm going to ask you, what is an RAP?
Oh, okay. So R stands for radio.
Yeah.
App.
Okay, I'm with you that far.
Yeah, okay. So it's just
a radio app, simple as that.
Yeah,
this is part of the Open RAN story, or it was originally.
Well, indeed. Well, and that's where I know we're gonna get into lots of slightly more arcane stuff in telecoms, but I welcome it. I just need to break myself in gently, you know what I mean?
So actually think about it in this way. One of the cool ideas from Open RAN that actually transfers it to purpose-built as well is the concept of service management and orchestration. So you basically build an operating system. Think about it in this way: Android and Apple of the telco world, and then you enable yourself as well as others through open interfaces to build applications. What should these applications do? It should actually provide what we call non-real-time control. Non-real-time control is higher than 1 second. What really works on the radio network below 1 second is the job of the radio software. Okay. What is above 1 second is the job of the RAP, the radio app.
And so what typically are you trying to control?
You try to control automation logic or AI at scale that actually bigger than the local intelligence of the node. So think about mobility, for example. If you would like to optimize mobility and make mobility better in a certain cluster, you need to be aware of the site itself as well as the surrounding neighbors. So you need a layer on top that is better in understanding and overseeing this from a helicopter view. That's basically what you do. So you try to provide some sort of a better performance and better efficiency coming out of the radio network just because you look from a higher altitude and you control this loop from a higher altitude.
Where's the software sort of hosted with RAPs? Would that be in like a sort of edge data center? Usually, it's not out at the base station sites, is it?
No, it's actually in a centralized location, which is typically one of the centralized location where you have core network and you have maybe other workloads that you do on-prem. So it's sitting there. The node that is sitting there, basically, it's called non-real-time rec.
Yep.
And then the RAP is application that runs on top of that. So that's like the kind of Android. You just make it in the center of the network, and then you build the apps and allow others to build apps on top as well.
So the SMO platform's the Ericsson Intelligent Automation Platform, is
correct,
it called?
Correct. That's the commercial name.
And then you've got the RIC kind of is a part of that.
Correct.
That supports the RAPs. I can't remember what the RIC was called. But
Radio Intelligent Controller. We call it Ericsson Intelligent Controller.
That's it. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So the control loops are with an RAP. It'd be more than a second. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's correct.
And that's not a barrier to doing the sorts of things that you need to do. It'd be like things like maybe powering down base stations at quiet periods, or
yeah, I mean that's what you do for energy efficiency, for example.
Right.
But you can also like what we have built is that you actually do a general anomaly detection of problems in the network, so understand where anomalies are, or where are like performance issues, and then you detect them, you analyze them, do a troubleshooting of it. That's all automated, and then you recommend actions. These actions could be, for example, changing the cell shape, changing beam configuration.
Right.
Could be like, powering up, powering down, changing a feature parameter, and that actually the list goes quite long.
Okay. And because this has been, because they've been a topic for a while, haven't they? Our apps ever since.
Still, it's quite hot. Actually.
It sort of predates the whole, generative AI, ChatGPT discussion. But has that had a big impact on it? I mean, your job title's got AI in it, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's look. I mean, you think about it in this way. The best thing that we have come together as an industry, I would say, in my opinion, within this bigger framework that we call autonomous networks, is the introduction of the SMO layer, because we wanted to have a platform that can scale AI, basically, right? We didn't have such kind of technologies before. You remember the times of 3G where the SON was introduced, this kind of legacy platform?
Well, I was going to ask you what's the difference, because people talked about CSON and DSON, didn't they, a long time ago?
Absolutely.
And they sound like they're doing the same sorts of things that, like the sort of SMO RIC is being talked about doing today. So I'm kind of wondering what the key sort of, what are the big differences really between them?
Well, I mean, the thing, if you think about the DSON, is basically what you have right now, intelligence in the radio software, is like, AI features that you have in the radio software. That's the distributed part of it. And then the central SON is what you do on the non-real time aspect. So SON used to be like legacy platforms that we actually inherited. If you think about the standardization, started in 3G with RNC, right? Radio Network Controller in the middle. And then we in the industry thought, okay, can we start to optimize by doing some logic in these RNCs centrally? This concept actually continued till the early days, I would say, even of 5G. But what SMO does today is actually give a layer that is open, standardized in the northbound and southbound, and that SON didn't provide actually in the industry.
Okay,
and that actually made the whole notion about, okay, can I do multi-vendor, and like it's a tailored thing that you need to do it for everyone.
So in CSON you'd have to be sort of all in with Ericsson or all in with Nokia or all in with Huawei, whereas with the SMO world,
it's an open one.
Someone should. So I mean, AT&T is the big example, because I guess they've very much made a thing about with using Ericsson's SMO platform across the whole of the network. But they should be able to bring in somebody else's.
Now. Yeah,
they're on what? Sorry,
1 of 5 now.
They're 1 of 5. Okay, I didn't realize.
And the list goes wrong. Yeah, it goes.
Okay,
goes wrong, yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know how many have been announced. I think Mass Orange had been announced, hadn't it, as one of the.
Yeah, Mass Orange is
a popular who the other ones were.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, but there's others as well.
And then you have, I mean, like it's public. So we have Swisscom, we have Vodafone. We have Telstra, that they're all on this journey. So they all ditched their own SON platforms. Either they get it from us. I'm also responsible for SON, by the way.
Right.
So they are basically right now on this kind of journey, and that's a journey of openness. I mean, like we were chatting outside about programmability. Actually, what does programmability mean? I mean, like the essence of it.
I still plan to give you a hard time about that.
Yeah, I mean, like you can give it now. It's okay.
No, carry on.
The thing about programmability narrative is that the ability for you, let's say for the operators or the service providers, to have a choice.
Yeah.
And this choice, you enable this to happen basically by being open on the interfaces, on the northbound and the southbound. This is basically what SMO does at the beginning, which is, okay, towards the southbound, towards radio, that's open interfaces, ORAN interfaces, which is basically O1.
This is O1, yeah, okay, O1. Right.
And then on the northbound, that's the R1 interface.
Right.
And that's all open interfaces. They actually, I mean, like you can go online and then search for SMO and RAP source code, and you can just find a lot of examples. You can just create it. Like there are some of the nerds that can actually even have an SMO on their laptops. So it is this kind of openness that you have, right? And then when you think about, you go up in the network, like on the network layer, and the SMO piece actually sits on the resource layer, which is basically on top of radio, immediately on top of radio. But then on top of that, you have the layer of services. which is like, the logical connection. If, for example, you would like to subscribe to a slice, and this slice will give you a better uplink speed during a special event. So where this kind of stitching of the requirements of radio, requirements on core to support you, it happens on the service layer. And then on top of that, you have the business layer, which is the BSS stack, charging and billing and core commerce and this kind of things.
Right.
If you think about the same way we mentioned about the programmability and open interfaces and then applications on top, think about the whole network with then interfaces towards like, even a layer above, which is like the API exposure that we talk about.
So is the SMO like involved in provisioning a slice? Because I always thought that would be more of a core network. It sits on top of the resources.
Right. It receives what we call the intent. The intent comes from the service layer. And then the service layer is the one that is responsible for basically, okay, this is what we need, this is what the network should behave to fulfill this slice. And then it gives orders, i.e. intents, towards the resource layer below. And this is where the SMO actually starts to operate and do the configuration, radio and core as well if it's needed.
Okay. So with this O1 interface in there, in theory, the 5 companies that are using this should be able to use Ericsson's SMO with somebody else's RAN.
Yeah, that's absolutely. If the other RAN is open and supporting this O1, that's correct. 100%.
And is that happening at all at the moment, or is
I mean, like, I would say, like, the progress is there. We are making progress in some of them, which is really good. But I'm like, that's probably my nature, like, which is like, I think there's still a lot to be done. So a lot to be desired to move to this fast, because it's also part of the movement to enable AI. Right. Because like, for you would like to have the same AI that runs like, Ericsson RAN and non-Ericsson RAN, right? So you have a harmonized ways of working. How would you get better user experience if you don't do that? If you have a boundary between different vendors just because one of them is not open enough.
Right.
That's the thing.
Okay. So, it could be you could, in theory, have an SMO from Ericsson with baseband software from another player, and then radio units from someone else. They could all be different. Is that?
Absolutely, absolutely. That's an option.
That reminds me. People listening may have worked out for themselves that this is slightly more Ian's comfort zone than it is mine in terms of subject matter.
He was like very, very quick actually.
Well, he is. He is. I mean, this is Ian's excellent at getting in the weeds. I, partly through thickness, partly through laziness, partly through areas of interest, tend to sort of take a step back and just look at the big picture, and I suppose ask myself, this all sounds very clever, but why do we care at the end of the day? And one of the themes, and correct me both of you if I've misinterpreted the discussion we had so far, but Open RAN came up, and Ian's obviously asking about this interoperability of different things. But in practice, and famously this is something that Ian, you've written about well on the matter of Ericsson and AT&T like a year or two ago. In practice, although the interoperability is there in theory, in practice it's still, the deployments are still quite monolithic. And it strikes me, and correct me if this is a mistaken assumption, that one of the reasons is while the capability is there to mix and match, the economics of it and the business best practice of it still points towards getting all your stuff from one player. Is that a fair observation? I
mean, economics is part of it. The other part is also resilience and performance. Yeah. So the thing is that you give the option, and then everyone tries to win on their own merits. So it's the service provider choice. If they make the choice that it's an open interface, but I still would like to go with a vertical stack, I mean, they're making an intelligent choice.
Indeed, and it's their choice. But then if that does end up being the better way of doing it, then what was the point of Open RAN?
It's the point of programmability on these different interfaces if you think about the application layer, right? So the example that I actually, like we mentioned about the radio applications, it's not only Ericsson who's building these applications, it's actually third parties. So, I mean, like today, just to give an example, today we have 90 different companies who are actually developing radio applications. These are apps. And they are developing it for Ericsson SMO and non-Ericsson SMO at the same time. So you give the option to the operator to basically select. And this is like one of the North American executives were basically expressing it. We were in a joint panel last year in MWC, and he said, like, when people ask me what programmability is, my answer is that my ability to make a choice and shape the network according to the business interest that I have. Could be like, I would like the network to be optimized for OPEX reduction. I would like it to be optimized for user
And are people
experience.
doing that?
Sorry?
Are operators making those choices?
Yeah, they are making these choices. Yes, that's correct. Yep.
I think my view from looking at this is that area that you're in specifically, the kind of R apps, and it sounds like there's been more competition injected there, certainly, than in I think what O-RAN started being, which was very much this conversation about the front haul, where you have, the opportunity to use radio units from someone and baseband software from someone else. I mean, I think that's more maybe a product of economics. There's been a few players, obviously, that have not gone out of business, but decided not to carry on doing radio units in the last sort of year. Mavenir, NEC, I think, is the latest one. So it's, but I don't sense it's necessarily a technical issue. Except maybe in Massive MIMO, that's the one area where people still seem to say it's quite challenging to.
It is quite challenging, and this is where you have, like, the as I mentioned, the resilience and performance.
Is it easier in the world of kind of RIC? Because when I've talked to people about multi-vendor deployments where you wanted to bring some Massive MIMO radios in and combine it with baseband software from another player. I always get the answer, well, you need the interface to be open, but even then, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done on integration. You have to have alignment on the algorithms that are being used. It can be so difficult that this is one of the reasons people have gone single vendor with that side of things. But is that quite different on the RIC side? Is it much, much more straightforward to have companies, like you've said, there's 90 of them, I think, working with you and putting their kind of apps on your...
Yeah,
I can't remember the name of it again, but
I mean, like, Ericsson Intelligent Controller, EIC.
Yeah.
So
Won't stay in your head.
EIC is right.
Yeah, just change the R for an E, and you're laughing.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. but look, the thing is like that. If the data is standardized on the O1 interface, this is possible because it abstracts the implementation of the algorithm. For example, like probably the challenge that you get in the uplink and downlink equalization. Maybe the uplink equalization a little bit more, right? But then this is abstracted for a radio application that runs on top. It's abstracted if you have the O1 data model. So from this perspective, yes, the answer is yes. But the thing is that I would say again, like, I would have loved the industry to be more bullish and more moving towards that, the same way that, the operators, for example, or the service providers are aspiring today.
So 90 is a lot. I mean, what are all their sort of contributions? I mean, I guess there's quite a bit of overlap. Some of them are positioning apps that do the same thing. And then I guess it's nice to have the choice if you're a telco.
Absolutely, yeah.
But whenever I think about this, like what could those apps be? Because the ones that always get cited are powering down base stations, or maybe moving more resources there if you've got a busy period. There's a concert going on or something. But what else could we see on the kind of app side of things? It's harder to imagine as many as you get in your phone, isn't it?
I mean, okay. So I mean, I don't know if this is going to be interesting.
Could you have Uber for the RAN?
Well, I mean, that's a good idea about that. Maybe we can think about that. But look, just coming from the Massive MIMO part, I mean, like, one important thing about Massive MIMO is the ability to choose what we call cell shapes, right? Which is basically how the beam forming is spread around in the cell coverage. So I'll give you an example. Like, Ericsson Radio provides you a choice of 12 cell shapes as of today, right?
Right.
And then if you think about how many frequency layers that you have for Massive MIMO, multiply this by the number of sites, multiply this by 12 number of shapes, and you would like, for example, to optimize an area in London. How many probabilities that you have out of that? It goes exponentially quite fast.
Yeah.
So
that'll be where AI obviously has a big role to play.
And this is exactly where something like one of our applications that we call like the cell shaper. The cell shaper basically makes the best choice of the cell shape for each and every cell in each and every frequency layer. So it makes this choice based on the data that is collected from the network. That you can do right now using something like EIC. But at the same time, it's not just like this choice of planning. But if you think about this one, and this is actually a recent thing that we did, one of the tier one operators in the US. You get a spectral efficiency of up to 10%. You get an improvement in user throughput with the double digits. And you get improvement in the uplink also with the double digits. You get improvement in the Warner call drop rate out of that, because obviously you optimize the coverage and the capacity at the same time. That's something that we were not able to do before, right?
Right.
So that's just an example coming from Massive MIMO. It's a little bit deeper in the technical weeds.
That's I mean, I would say. I'm concentrating real hard. I've only had half a beer.
Yeah.
So in fact, I think sometimes these things sink in better.
But they're not things that a customer. I mean, for a customer, I guess the benefit is your service works well, and you. It's
well, I was
not
going to ask
like
a question. Isn't a big utility for a lot of that stuff at the higher frequencies that are getting freed up, because you need to do more clever stuff with the radio to overcome the propagation sort of challenges of higher frequency. Is that a correct assumption?
Yeah, but not on the. I mean, like high band is part of it. You probably refer to high band and challenges of high band propagation.
Yeah, well, just anything where you go much mid band and up. I mean, the propagation. My understanding, and for you to correct, is that it puts more of a premium on spectral efficiency and on beamforming and being able to make the most of that spectrum, because it's a bit worse without that.
Absolutely, and it is a big investment actually. So if you think about, if operators are paying billions of dollars, which they are actually making right now in a spectrum, and then you are able to optimize and give a spectral efficiency of 10%, let's assume that they paid 100 billion, right?
Yeah.
Which is a typical number, like, in a big spectrum portfolio. And then you save 10% out of that, right? I mean, like you save them a good amount of money.
Yeah.
So they actually sweating the assets out of it. And then at the same time that they improve the OPEX efficiency. So
is there anything you can see in that area where an ordinary person who doesn't know anything about telecom and they just use their phone would see some kind of, they go, oh wow, it's because of this RIC stuff.
Why should
that
normies give a fuck, Ibrahim?
Or is there a kind of revenue growth? Because a lot of it just seems to be. I'm not saying efficiency is not important, by the way, and cost savings may be the most important thing at the moment. But is there anything where you could see this actually leading to sales growth for the telcos?
Oh, that's an interesting one. And I had a recent conversation around that with some of the colleagues and customers as well. So the thing is like this: what really drives you as a consumer to pay more? Is it performance of the network, or is it?
That's the $1 million question in this industry, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
We just won't pay more. On the whole.
Then the thing is that you can actually pay more. Let's think about that. Have you been to World Cup before?
To the World Cup?
Yeah.
No, and I'm not going to go anymore. Have you seen the prices of the tickets?
Yeah, I mean, they're...
Jesus Christ.
Unless it's
How
in
much are the
England.
tickets? I didn't even know.
Yeah, they're like $1,000 or something. $1,000 plus, starting at $1,000. It's complete
And
scam.
there's the travel there in the hotel.
And there's a travel, yeah. So I haven't, and I'm not going to. But what was your?
But
premise?
let's assume that you are going for an event like that, football match or whatever, of equivalent, and then today you have your smartphone and you would like probably to tell and share with others how beautiful the experience is in the stadium, right? And then all of the people around, they actually is thinking the same. So they congest the uplink because everyone would like to go live probably, or send something on the uplink, or send a video, right? So it makes the uplink path quite crowded.
Yeah.
So what if I actually give you a slice, a temporary service, and what we call, let's say, uplink boost.
Yeah.
So you pay, I don't know, $10 for these 2 hours. You get an uplink priority compared to the rest. So you actually have a better experience.
Yeah, we've chatted about that in the pod before, and also wondered what the billing mechanism would be, whether it would be part of the cost of the ticket or whether it's directly through the operator and all that sort of thing.
I was just going to say that's something that the RIC would come into, that story, because that story often gets talked about in the context of things like network KPIs and network slices. Yeah, I mean, I think Ericsson uses that quite a lot. Someone going to a Taylor Swift concert, and they want to kind of. I've probably written it in my about 1 million pieces because I just write the same story again and again. But you sort of film someone and upload it, and you get your kind of your slice, but the RIC has a relevance to that kind of story.
It's in the relevance in the stack. Remember the stack that I mentioned on the resource and service and business. So actually the thing starts from the business layer. So saying like, okay, I would like to give Jan, an uplink boost for 2 hours. That actually comes all the way from up. And then it has to be translated to the certain cell that you are there needs to give you the priority for resources. That's done through the RIC and RAP that runs on top. So it's actually like you don't see it. For you, it's transparent. What you see is probably like, a billing mechanism or charging mechanism that might be different, as you say. But in the end, what goes really to be configured on the resources is done through an RAP.
Okay.
I was... some of what Ibrahim said made me want to go in a direction I was planning to anyway, which is talk more about programmable networks, which is obviously a very major sort of strategic cornerstone of Ericsson. But before I sort of steer us in that direction, Ian or Ibrahim, on the topic that we originally started talking about, and your day job, I guess, are there any other things that... Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, because RApps is one side of that kind of network app story, but the other one that's been talked about as like previously is XApps, which seems to have gone much, much quieter. Like, I don't hear anybody talking about XApps anymore.
Old news.
Which I think was positioned to be the sort of real-time RIC, wasn't it? And sub a second, 10 milliseconds. But is there a reason why no one, and some of the people that were pushing XApps quite a bit at first, really seems to be talking about XApps. I just get the impression the industry's almost kind of given up on it.
It's an X topic.
It has become an X topic, it seems. But
I think again it was one of the concepts that started in the ORAN discussion, right?
Yeah.
And then over the time the industry realized that whatever could happen in an X app or could be implemented in the X app could actually be done better in the radio software itself.
Right. Okay.
So from this perspective,
in the baseband stuff.
In the baseband itself.
Yeah.
So you see the discussion around X app basically, as you said, faded out because the radio software as well is getting more and more intelligent. So you start to get more AI, you're probably well educated on that AI in and on and for, right?
Yeah.
So what when you get AI in the radio software, you question actually why should you have another controller with another application that runs on top. Plus there are also security considerations when it comes to that because you have an exposure of protocols that control radio resource, like RRC, what we call radio resource protocols or radio resource connections.
Right.
So from this perspective, I think we in the industry realized that we as technology leaders, as well as with our customers, we realized that whatever could have been done in XApp is better than in the radio software itself, and that's the path that we have.
Everybody, but it seems like everybody else seems to be on the same path as well.
Yep.
At the moment.
Yep. Because it makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the actual sort of RAP side of things, is that doing? Has it got a lot of traction? Are people sort of investing in this? Do you see? AT&T is the operator that I think quite prominently spoken about wanting to take advantage, and they kind of talk about the SMO side of things. But do you see telcos in Europe kind of getting behind this? And
well, we have two customers in
Mass
Europe,
Orange and Vodafone.
We have also Swisscom.
I know it's a bit frothy this beer.
Yeah.
Right. Ian, did you jog in?
But you didn't. But hold on, you didn't. I brought some sweets with me from Spain.
True, I completely forgot to.
Yeah, we went through directly to the discussion. Right?
I know. Sorry. So you're not drinking, but we forgive you.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
Oh wow! But you bought some cool sweets from Spain.
Okay, these look brilliant.
Yeah, let's talk about these.
Yeah, it's like. Yeah, the thing is that I hope that you find.
Let's talk through them.
You find them
intact. We've got the Turon.
Yes.
Yeah, I know that Turon. That's sometimes what they call nougat, isn't it?
Yeah.
This is Turon de chocolate con almendras, which I'm sure people know means almonds.
Yeah, marzipan.
And then we've got figuritas de marzipan, little shapes. We've got little dudes made out of marzipan.
So it's and this is another
Turon.
one.
This is a regular sort of white Turon de Alicante. And then we've got polvorones de almendra con chocolate.
Oh, that's a classic too.
Yeah. Are you familiar with this? Are you?
Mm-hmm. It really explodes in your mouth.
Is it like
crumbly?
It's just like lots of ground almonds.
Yeah,
that sort of thing. Wow, thank you very much. And with chocolate, as if it wasn't lardy enough. You're gonna ruin my figure, Ibrahim.
Yeah, look,
I can eat those for you if you want.
I've still got Still got Luke's Irish chocolates in my bag. I forgot to take them out. Well, thank you very much. We'll put them.
I've polished those off.
Right, were they nice?
Yeah, I mean, we ate them on Magda's 50th.
birthday.
Yeah.
So. Thanks for that, Ibrahim. That's very generous. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I thought that,
we'll fight over them.
Sweet end of January, right? I mean, so.
There we are. Well, do you know what? All things being equal, this would have been the end of my dry January.
Yeah, I know that.
And because I'm just such an appalling alcoholic, I sort of try and sort of knock it on the head for 1 month a year. But we had some friends at a PR agency who had a drinky session a week ago, and that ruined that for me. So that's my excuse. But still, 3 weeks better than nothing. I'm sure my liver's grateful.
No,
but thanks a lot for that. We'll fight over them. I think Pierre's already got his eye on one of them.
Oh, he can have the chocolate ones there because he even knew what they were.
Yeah, well, we'll see. We still haven't decided who, if anyone's going to take Luke's whiskey home. Do you fancy it, Ian?
Yeah, but I don't think I should because I'm not very good with that sort of thing. I'm not very responsible.
Neck it and turn into a tramp.
This is a funny thing. Just leave it here.
While we're on this tangent, we were chatting. Ian doesn't keep booze at home. And he says he doesn't trust himself not to neck it. I'm sure you wouldn't be that bad. Whereas I'm the opposite. Mm-hmm. I've got a whole cabinet full of different spirits, and I've basically got a whole fridge given over to like white wine, rosé, and beer. So we got opposite approaches. Yeah, well, we can leave it there, but I'm worried we'll never drink it.
Let's think about it.
Okay.
We don't have to resolve this discussion now.
Okay, we don't. We could just start swigging from the bottle. Indeed, yeah.
While we're on other topics, by the way, breaking news: Djokovic has just beaten Sinner in the Australian Open. If there are any fans out there,
obviously people listening,
we'll know the tournament's finished.
Oh, well, that's incredible, though.
Yeah,
that is
for a guy who's almost 40.
Yeah. To be one of the two clear best players in the world, that's amazing. Well, shall I pick this juncture to sort of just take a look? I was going to
ask one more thing before you move it on. I was just like, there's a lot of companies who obviously don't make the sort of investments that Ericsson does on the network side, but they can still be involved in this through developing apps.
Oh.
I think you were saying all you need is a laptop, really, and you could put together something with software that would allow you to do something whizzy with base stations and there's quite a lot of companies involved, but presumably Ericsson's also developing its own apps. It's not just doing the kind of RIC platform for this. You're investing a lot in doing your own sort of apps. And what kind of apps have you sort of focused on? Is it some of the things that you've talked about already, but are there new ones kind of coming that
you're going to tell us for the first time on this podcast?
You're going to exclusively reveal.
We are more and more into transformation, like the AI transformation of, if you're familiar a little bit with what we call the high value scenarios in autonomous networks, it's like, how you basically take an end-to-end process to optimize the network. So it's like, the typical, if you think about the optimization process that operators kept using since the time of 2G has not really changed compared to 5G. Is like what changes is the counter next to the G and the name of the parameter or the name of the feature or the configuration. But the same process is like, an engineer comes in the morning, they open their laptop, they look at, for example, which are the worst performing cells in this area, let's say in London. And because we are humans, we have limited capability of processing information. So we just take the top 10%, for example, and then we start to work on them. And then by the end of the day, you have resolved 10% of the problems, which are like, the most demanding, let's me put it this way. But what about the rest of the network is like the 90%. Yeah. So what we started to think about, and we actually executed on that, is we put down a process that you handle 100% of the cells every day. So engineers come in the morning, they actually find the network analyzed, 100% of the network footprint is analyzed. But it's not only that, there is also a root cause that happens on top. It's like why this bad performance is there. For example, if there is an interference, where is it coming from? Is it internal interference or someone with a jammer who is actually making, a little bit of the disruption in the spectrum? And then it gives you this kind of root cause, but it does not really stop at that because it starts to give you recommendation. So what should you do in order to resolve that? And then when you connect it to a rec, you just have a closed loop out of that.
Right.
So this is a flow that we like, you know.
So eventually you don't need anybody at all. They won't even make a recommendation. They'll just go, but this is the obvious solution to this. We might as well just do it.
Yeah. So it's actually like you enable it actually to work.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of apps that we are working more and more towards.
Right.
Is like, you know, you put AI at scale. So you change the processes, you make a transformation for real using the technology.
Okay.
So these are like they are cool apps. I mean, like, you know, that we develop. So I'm responsible for these apps. And then we have, because you were asking about like, you know, BCSS, what we do actually, I have a sister organization who is responsible for the platform.
Yeah.
So actually we have a separation of concern. So it's like, you know,
So you're the app side.
I'm the app side, and then I have a colleague who's taking care of the platform side.
Okay.
So he invites everyone like basically to work, and I'm basically part of his ecosystem.
So he does the EIC.
Yes.
And is there somebody else like looking after, because the SMO is like the big thing that groups all this together, I guess, isn't it? But is there someone kind of responsible for other bits of the
That's all part of BCSS you were asking.
Yeah.
So we have a team who's basically taking care of, for example, the ENM, the Ericsson Network Manager, which is part of EIEP, and then we have another team on the service layer who's taking care of what we call SOA, Service and Orchestration, and that's another organization you're probably familiar with. It's called BOSS, the OSS and BSS organization. We are all part of BCSS. So we basically, if you think about BCSS, what we do is we create this autonomous network transformation for our customers.
Right.
So we take care of the different layers in the autonomous network, and we go also to the resource layers like core, for example, which is also part of BCSS. So these are different units that we have embedded in BCSS, and then you have the services.
What BCSS stand for again?
Business area, cloud and software, cloud.
Right. So in the quarterlies that I wrote up, it's the segment cloud, software and service. Right.
So
congratulations, it's doing a bit better these days, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, like we have done a lot of measures. We have good growth as well.
It was profitable last year.
Because it had been a bit of a turnaround story there, if I remember rightly.
It is. It is.
Is a lot of this stuff like changing the kind of I guess the sort of architecture of how networks are done? Like you used to, I mean, we talked about CSON and DSON a bit, which aren't really going to be things anymore, but there used to be this thing called the element management system, didn't there? EMS in old sort of traditional networks. But would that disappear and be replaced by an SMO or a part of an SMO in future?
Element management system and network management system, they are actually in our architecture, they are part of the SMO.
They are. Okay.
So how they evolve it's actually a journey, because the thing is that if you think about it like that, Ian, I mean, like we understand that operators are quite cautious where they spend on new technology. So if you can leverage on what they have today, and you try to build the remaining pieces of the puzzle together with them, and then they can maximize the investment of what they have. So it's not like, you just like, rip and replace completely, because sometimes ripping and replacing does not make sense.
Yeah.
But it makes more economical sense and performance sense that you actually build upon the installed base and grow from that. And this is what we do, for example, with EIAP and the SMO.
And of some of the just on the kind of deployment of our apps, are they out there already, like running some of these things, or are we still at the kind of talking about it stage, or would companies like AT&T and Mass Orange and Vodafone and some of the others actually be using this stuff in live commercial networks already?
Well, I cannot comment on customers
I know you can say
that, but there are. There are actually and delivering results. Yes.
Okay.
There are. Yep.
Cool. I was wondering actually just about the more go-to-market side of it. You reminded me of the different segments, and I'm just reminded back to me covering, when I cover Ericsson's quarterlies, I lean quite heavily on the presentation and just take screenshots from it, because a picture tells 1,000 words and all that.
You can download. You don't need to take the picture. It's just go to investor relation and download it.
I do download it. Download it, but to turn it into something that I can use on the site, I still have to take a screenshot.
Okay.
But I do download the PDF and go through it all, yeah. But I can't just whack a PowerPoint into the website. It doesn't work that way. Perhaps I need an R app to help me do it.
I mean, use Genie.
Yeah, well,
Gen AI will do
Gen
it.
AI.
They don't need an app for that.
You need a
It's
chat
just-
GPT for it, Scott.
No,
if you wanna go down that.
I feel like I'm
risky route.
I feel like I'm actually doing some work when I take the screenshot and crop it and upload it as a JPEG and all that sort of thing. And one of the slides I like is the one that it summarizes. It's got a grid that summarizes both regional and business group. And so you got, and then on the top line, networks accounts for 64% of sales, cloud software and services, which is your bit, is 29%, and enterprise 7%. It just made me think. I'm just wondering about the go-to-market. So someone's a networks customer of Ericsson, but when they get involved with your side of things, is that a completely separate sort of commercial interaction, or is it sometimes sold as a great big sort of monolithic bundle, all that sort of thing? And presumably a lot of this is confidential and you're going to want to keep your cards close to your chest, but I'm just curious to know how people buy this stuff that you've just been talking about.
Well, I mean, the commercial models depends on the customer, like I would say, kind of typical procurement process. So there are customers who would like, they have a procurement window where, for example, they would like to acquire differentiated connectivity and autonomous networks at the same time. So they would like to do this as one bundle. At the same, they might go for one partner and say, we would like to get this for you, for example, for this part of the network. Or they might choose that to do a procurement differently at different times. So they have different procurement windows. So I would say we have mix and match out of that. So It's not a single thing. So, but some of the operators, they do this. Some of them, they issue specific RFPs for this piece. Some of them, they say, you know what, I would like to procure, for example, the platform alone, the application alone, so I make this separate. So we have quite flavorful and colorful grid of different options.
And I'm assuming in the last decade or so, while we've been talking about Open RAN and all that sort of thing, it is now the two areas of the business are commercially a little bit more separate because people are freer thanks to things like Open RAN to sort of mix and match. It's not necessarily a given that someone who's a networks customer is going to necessarily do business with your part of the company.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there are different, and the other way around as well. Yeah.
Okay, well, and I guess that's a positive, even though Ian and I are quite rightly sceptical about Open RAN versus its initial promises. I suppose that's a positive that's come from it, and that's where when I've always tried to be devil's advocate and support it. It's created the potential for this greater mixing and matching. Whether or not, as you say, operators choose to use that potential is another matter.
Is that because the word programmability that gets applied to Open RAN these days, not just by Ericsson, though I think you guys are the first people to do it. But
thank you, because that was the direction I was going to steer us in anyway.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
No, so carry on.
Nokia uses this all the time now, and other people talk about it quite a lot as well, this concept of programmability. I think Rakuten was going on about it last year at MWC, Open RAN's all about programmability. But is it that, Rick, so the bit you're in, really, is that where it comes from, the programmability, or are we talking about something more
I would say this is the lowest barrier of entry, lowest barrier of innovation for third parties.
The RAPs type
yeah, exactly.
Stuff.
Because that's why, I mean, the thing is that when it is easy to build applications, you will find a lot. I'm saying you have an ecosystem of 90 players.
Yeah.
So it's 90 you're basically building. I mean, right now we are counting in triple digits the number of environments and development environments that are basically available for developers to do that because of lower barrier of entry.
Yeah.
So you were just commenting at the beginning. I mean, doing massive MIME was not easy, right? Yeah. So there is a high barrier. Yeah, exactly. The thing is that
fucking nightmare, mate.
There is a high barrier of entry because that's quite complex. Actually, dealing with the air interface is really a complex job because, again, that's a spectrum. That's the most valuable asset.
Well, that's why there aren't many Ericssons in the world.
Absolutely. There's only one for 150 years.
There we go.
Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, joking aside, that we hear. I'm not looking to go down a geopolitical tangent here, but we hear people like the US president lamenting how few players there are, and obviously for geopolitical reasons in a lot of parts of the world there's only the choice between Nokia and Ericsson for radio stuff. And the reason that there's now an effective duopoly in those places is because it's bloody hard to do. Otherwise more people will be doing it and making money out of it. So yes, That's just for me. That's just my way of getting my head around how complicated it is.
Yeah, it is. It requires a lot of R&D investment, a lot of competence, and a lot of talent, and institutional knowledge as well.
I was just reminding myself of your LinkedIn, Ibrahim, and you've definitely got the techie chops. So you've been with Ericsson for 19 years.
Yeah.
And a lot of that time you were just like getting your hands dirty, sort of dealing with the actual projects and building stuff out.
At the beginning, that's correct, yes.
Yeah.
At the coalface.
Sorry?
At the coalface.
Yeah. But I mean, that's presumably how it should be. You want someone who's now at a more sort of senior managerial level to know exactly how things are done right down there. You can't just be theoretical. Must be handy. I mean, it must have evolved a hell of a lot over the time you've been there.
Yeah, absolutely, a lot. I mean, like I remember first time ever that we were basically discussing like an AI for some sort of network optimization was back in 2013. I was at this time in Istanbul actually with a Turkish customer. I mean, like it was quite basic actually.
Yeah.
So at this time it was also quite hard to scale. So yes, things have changed dramatically.
Oh, you were Turkey and Iran. My wife's from Iran. So don't worry, I'm not going to start asking you about what's going on in Iran at the moment. He's thinking, let's not going with this.
I mean, like it's at this time I was responsible for broadband networks, yes, across both countries. Yeah,
excellent. The sort of direction I've been, that Ian's sort of assisted me steering it towards. I don't know to what extent this is your concern as part of your day job, but we were chatting about it a bit beforehand. My understanding of Ericsson's a big part of Ericsson's sort of broader, longer term strategy is still around programmable networks, APIs, stuff related to the Vonage acquisition, which if you just take it on surface, given the write down of the value of that acquisition, it's hard to say it's been an overwhelming success initially. But then, when I push back in that way, when I'm chatting to people from Ericsson, they're always like, well, Rome wasn't built in a day. This stuff's going to take a while to play out. But, you may know, I don't know if you've listened to podcasts where we've talked about it before, and I don't want to speak for Ian, but I think we're both sort of still need convincing that this strategy is a really good one. So maybe just as we've got you in the room, just tell us about the programmable networks strategy and why perhaps we should be more bullish about it than we are.
Well, I think right now, to a certain extent, you're probably well informed about the story of how RAIC and our apps actually are. Now, let's go 2 or 3 layers above and think about, rather than just having a controller for radio, you actually have the network interfaces open for you to program.
Yeah, for third parties.
So, and that's actually, if you think about it, that's the essence of giving interfaces and APIs to developers to develop apps on top.
And right? I can understand that in my need to put this in a very reductive words, one syllable way. I can understand it in the context of the smartphone, and it's only because people like Uber were given the APIs to innovate on top of iPhones and Android phones that we got all this cool stuff. So is it quite analogous to that?
It is. And then actually, but the thing is that, and this is work that we are doing all the time, is that we enable more APIs and more use cases and more capabilities exposed from the network. I mean, we just, I think like a week or so, we announced that we enable 5G advanced location services out from the core and expose this all the way up to the APIs. So from this perspective, if you think about an application that like an application developer was sitting on top and have this network API exposure, and they would like to develop, think about, like we just mentioned, Uber, right? Uber needs to know your location.
Totally.
So the thing is that maybe I can actually offer you a service, or I give you let's think about that. I can recognize where you are, and you know what? You pass like nearby a shop, and then I'm a shop owner, I subscribe to a certain app that detects you moving nearby. I tell you, I give you a notification. You know what, Scott? If you enter right now with this code that you have in your mobile.
I remember writing about, sorry to butt in, I remember writing about location-based services like pre all of this, almost pre the iPhone. When I was wearing a different hat, this would have been in the middle of the 2000s.
You looked at my LinkedIn profile. Actually, I have a little bit of an adventure after I finished school on location-based services startup.
But this
was this Astrolabe?
Exactly. So it's even older than that. So I agree with you. It's older than that.
And so just let me quickly finish this line of inquiry. So you're talking about, so you know better than I do that location-based service has been a thing for 20 years plus.
But there was never a scale for that. That's the difference.
So
right?
That's what I was leading up to.
Exactly. So there was no scale for that. You were not having a capability that, you know what, probably in the same country, you have one API for all different operators that you can actually just build an application on top and everyone will use it.
So the technology and infrastructure just wasn't there to make it scalable.
Yes, correct.
But I guess the skeptics on location-based services would say, well, hasn't all that been sort of superseded now by, you know, the world of the smartphone, where, you know, we'll all go outside this building and look at our Google Maps and it pinpoints which street you're on, and I
think he's talking about push notifications. And
But the thing is that it depends on the metadata that you have with the location. Because when you get the data from the network, you don't just get the location, just like, you know, lat and long. You actually get it with metadata that is useful for your application. You don't get this over the top. That's the difference. Yeah.
Right. And what sort of applications would that be useful for?
I mean, the sky is the limit. I mean, like, we would like the developers just to think about that. I just gave you an example. I mean, like, you know, I was thinking around, like, you know, I can build an app based on this kind of exposure. You just pass by, I don't know, like, you know, a shop, and I detect that you're passing by. I give you an immediate offer. Just enter now. And that's valid for, I don't know, 15 minutes.
But that's the thing, isn't it? That's where you'll get pushback from someone like me, is like, and I've heard this, you're very much on message for Ericsson, because I've heard this from some of your colleagues in the past. In fact, I might have even heard it from Per Narvingen when I spoke to him just before around the quarterlies a week or two ago. But it just doesn't seem to have happened yet. And so each year there's it's coming. Just you wait and see. They're going to start innovating like mad over all this stuff that we've invested so heavily into giving them, but they're still not doing it. Is there something I need to know about what's holding things up?
Well, I think it's more like getting an industry momentum behind that,
right,
and getting more developers to start to experiment, right? You know, one of the things that we were successful with when it comes to, again, Rec and app, is that we have like an SDK that is powered by some GenAI capabilities that makes it like low code, no code kind of thing of development. Yeah. You know, Adona is on a path that enables this for developers. So you're right, Rome was not built in a day. Mm-hmm. So it will take some time that you actually create such kind of SDK capabilities. It exists today, but you need to build the developer community around that, and that's not scaling yet. So it's a patient,
exactly.
You know,
I hear you loud and clear, and I've got some sympathy for that. Obviously, as journalists, we've always got this sense of urgency and immediacy in what we do.
Yeah, I've just been waiting for Topshop to email me and say, you're walking past now, you need to come in.
In. There's
been a gap in my life for 20 years.
We've got a great fleece for you. I mean, going back to the LBS of 20 years ago, I remember when I first saw it, and this is when augmented reality was a thing that I first became aware of, and I think a certain company might have heard of called Nokia had a phone then, back when they did phones, that had quite a cool initial augmented reality thing where you just hold it up and through the screen you'd get an augmented reality real-time view of what's around you. But again, that never really turned into anything. And I guess that's interesting. And you know, we don't know, as you say, we don't know. It's not your job to do the innovating. It's your job to provide the platform and the tools to enable it and see what people do. And I guess it's testing the limits of my imagination to see what that will be. And believe me, I'll be the first to write it up and celebrate it when something comes along. I hate to use the word killer app, but you know what I mean? When something like that comes along. I think
location-based services have sort of happened. It's just, I mean, this, like you say, applying metadata to it, where you can do something that's a bit more targeted but based on where you are, is really interesting. And if the only way of doing that is through this sort of telco route, if you like, then that's great for the telecom sector, because that's added value they can bring that the over-the-top players, then maybe there's not a way of them doing that. But I think some of the things that we're looking at now, the Ubers and of course, there's the connectivity you need, but the you don't need this sort of world of APIs to do that. It's worked quite well just on a sort of app running on a 4G network and basic mapping with GPS. As they are location-based services that have worked quite well without the involvement of. So this is interesting if it is something that you'd actually need this whole Aduna setup to. Yeah, and that's great.
I mean, and that's something I like. Like more and more that we have these capabilities exposed all the way from the resource layer up to the API exposure, we get more developers in the ecosystem.
Because you talked about 5G Advanced there a bit, but is going back
Ian
down
was a waste of time the other day.
Sorry?
Ian wrote a story saying it was
a waste of time.
I know.
I wasn't talking about 5G Advanced. I was talking about standalone. I was talking about people being able to monetize it.
That's true. I conflate standalone and advanced.
No, it's not the same.
Okay, I'll shut up now.
But going back down the other way rather than up, right down to sort of the base station level, does 5G Advanced have a big... I mean, you were talking about XApps not being of interest as much because you put that sort of intelligence actually into the nodes and it goes into the baseband software. But does 5G Advanced have a big impact at that particular level, or is it more about the opposite end of it that we've just been chatting about for a while?
Well, the thing is that with 5G Advanced, you have capabilities in the radio software that enables more and more, for example, like slicing and dynamic slicing to work better and work more efficiently and give different configuration that were not enabled before.
So dynamic slicing is like sort of spinning it up on the fly. And
yes. Yeah. So with 5G Advanced, you can actually have this kind of capabilities already on the radio, and that's obviously 5G standalone plus, right? So that's what enables it to have. But on the other side, it also what I was just mentioning about AI and RAN. That's also part of 5G Advanced capabilities. Is link adaptation, where you use AI algorithm to optimize link adaptation, which is again something probably used to be treated the same since the times of 2G. But when you get AI in, you get a spectral efficiency gain. And again, every megahertz that you actually save in spectral efficiency, sometimes it gets 10, 100, even $1 billion worth.
So presumably you could do. It doesn't have to be just link adaptation.
Yeah, absolutely. There are a multitude of different things.
Penn is always going on about link adaptation. But you could do this in other algorithms as well. You could introduce AI and ML to have some kind of spectral efficiency.
Yeah, I mean, there is also AI for mobility. Is how you optimize mobility thresholds where users are moving between cells, for example. That's also one of the things that we use AI in.
Right.
And there are also capabilities that help you to have more capable algorithms using, for example, periodic measurement of user location and periodic measurement of user performance and making this available. So all of that actually contribute to AI that you have in RAN. Yes. Okay. So link adaptation is one of the things, as I mentioned. Everything that actually touches the spectrum and gives the spectral efficiency is a direct contributor to CapEx efficiency.
Is it possible that we have AI and ML being introduced to almost completely substitute for some of these human generated algorithms that launch things like channel estimation and stuff that have been there they've been optimized over a period of 40 years since people started looking into this stuff?
These are active areas of research. Yes, They are all active areas of research.
Okay.
Yep.
That's pretty fascinating.
I've just been belatedly trying to compensate for my ignorance, and I've been Googling the difference between 5G Advanced and 5G SA. But I want to test you two. Starting with you, Ian, as you quite rightly corrected me. What's the difference?
Well, I don't want to explain it. I'm just a journalist. Well, I'm not going to explain it in front of someone.
I'm not going to. No, I'm not going to put
that area.
No, and I'm not going to put Ibrahim on the spot either. That's not fair.
To play a set of tennis with Roger Federer or something.
Yeah, well, Ibrahim's sitting there going, he's got his head in his hands, going, Jesus Christ, this is what we got to deal with.
5G Advanced is more or less like an industry terminology. It's when you are moving to 3GPP releases of 18, 19 and above. So that's basically a little bit on that.
Very good. 18 plus. You 10 out of 10, Ibrahim.
Well,
that's what I got.
Thank you.
Standalone's getting back to sort of release 15 or something.
Very good. Both of you get top marks.
And it's the new call.
This is what Gemini tells me.
Okay. Yeah.
This is what Gemini tells me.
I thought that you don't want to go to this technical details.
I know, but every now and then I realise
18, right?
Every now and then I realise how hopelessly out of my depth I am, and I try desperately to sort of make up the difference. I quite like Telefonica's write-up. They go 5G Advanced is an improved version of 5G. Oh, cheers, Telefonica.
It's like 5G, but better.
You know 5G?
It's
well, it's better
advanced.
than that. At least we're not using... Do you remember we used to use like sort of 3.75G and all these little decimals? We don't seem to be doing that anymore, and that's good because that used to really annoy me.
I think calling something 4G when it was actually HSPA.
Which the Yanks used to do all the time, didn't they? Who was that? Was it AT&T that did that, or was it T-Mobile? One of those two.
I think it's T-Mobile, actually.
T-Mobile went early on that. I think AT&T went early on 5G. Theirs was definitely like 4G and a bit.
5G plus.
4G plus, I think they called it. Anyway, okay. I wouldn't mind, given the time we got left.
Oh, when are we going to see 6G arrive?
Sorry, yeah.
I mean, the standardization.
And do we need it? What's the point of it?
I mean, there is definitely a point of having 6G. I mean, like, it's, I will, there is always a driver where you're moving for a certain G to the next, right? And there are a lot of things, for example, like, integrated sensing, which you need to improve on how the networks behave and designed in order to enable something like that to happen. So integrated sensing is...
And if that comes off, then I could see interesting new apps. I can't picture the specific app. Of course, if I could, I wouldn't be sat here. I'd be off making loads of money doing that. But you could see how, in principle, I mean, Ian always jokes that that senses how full your beer glass is and fills it up automatically for you. I suspect that won't be the killer app, but you can see how.
Yeah, but then we need it for a small cell kind of thing, because definitely, right? I mean, so we need to do that. Yeah, it's a good idea.
I think it's a great idea.
We are working on the standardization of 6G right now, so probably we can.
I think that's the killer.
You put that towards 3GPP.
You're in a pub, you're drinking, and it detects that your beer is almost drunk.
Yeah.
And the barman immediately gets.
Believe me.
By that stage, it won't be a barman. It'll be
Wait,
Sean Young from Blade Runner.
Sorry, how is 6G going to help with that?
Integrate. Was it ISAC?
Integrated sensing.
Yeah, basically, it's like a kind of radar. It's using the radio networks to actually sense the physical environment.
The physical environment. So it's like a invisible glove, sort of sensing that your glass.
Picture like the sort of Matrix when Neo's seeing the word as a bunch of ones and zeros.
Like when you do a LiDAR scan, but how many of these sensors would you need?
Yes, like a LiDAR scan almost, yeah.
Well, it wouldn't be a sensor, it would be part of the radio network. That's meant to be the point.
So the radio network.
Oh, so it would feel the whole thing.
If you've got enough equipment rolled out, you can feel everything in the whole.
But to what distance?
This is the question.
Millimeters?
I don't think they know that yet.
That's still a pre-standardization
work. Yourself, Pierre.
Oh, I'm asking the right.
He's only just found out about it. He's getting excited.
He's getting interested. Yeah, it's very good, very good. Yeah.
Like, is it to a foot? That's not really helpful.
Well, I mean, I cannot say now, but that's like an ongoing work, because 6G right now we are in pre-standardization phase, and then 28 we start like a little bit of quote unquote trials, and then 2030 plus is the deployment. So we're still in the early stages of 6G standardization.
They talk about ISAC a lot in the military context at the moment.
They probably already have it.
Our mate Cohere spoke about it a fair bit as well.
Cohere Technologies is really into that. Detecting drones, that are being flown into Ukraine.
You weren't there when we did the recording from the pub where I just hastily bought some little clip-on mics that we did. We were talking about that a fair bit there. What was I going to say? Yes. So we covered the programming. The only other thing I wanted to do, we've probably only got about 40 minutes or so left. And there was one more segment I wanted to cover with you, given your job title and your area, which is more general AI. So not necessarily in the Ericsson context. And I think we've covered that a fair bit. Obviously, we could go deeper. But just more generally, and I was telling you before we started recording about an essay that was published this week. I can always have another, mate. Called The Adolescence of Technology by Dario Amadei. So, no, I want the other one. Ian's just giving me a shit beer.
Hey!
Well, you can have it then.
The people of Colorado would be
upset. You have the shit beer.
It's not shit beer.
Dario Amadei, who's the CEO of Anthropic, which is one of the big LLM companies. And it's a really long essay, and I won't even try and paraphrase it, but it's on his own blog. And the reason he calls it the adolescence of technology is he makes reference to a science fiction book written by Carl Sagan called Contact, where someone's asked, if you meet an alien...
Oh, he's always going on about that.
Oh, is this quite a well-trodden path for him?
It's a decent movie, actually.
He goes, if you could ask the aliens just one question, what would it be? And the reply of this astronaut is, I'd ask them, how did you do it? How did you evolve? How did you survive this technological adolescence without destroying yourself? Without having read the book. You know, these aliens have obviously managed interstellar travel and all that sort of thing. And this astronaut's wondering, how did they get from, I don't know, being cavemen or whatever, to interstellar travel without fucking themselves up on the various stages in between, like nuclear weapons or whatever. And obviously in this case, he's referring specifically to AI, which it does seem, you get lots of people going, don't underestimate how quickly this shit is developing. And I mean, there's another phrase that I've heard where things are often overestimated in the short term or underestimated in the long term technological development or something like that. But this seems to be very sort of highly estimated in the short term. And it does freak people out. It certainly freaks me out. And we've gone on about it countless times on the pod, how the sort of more dystopian take on it. But yeah, I was just wondering, like more broadly, given that this is part of your world and you're presumably acutely aware of how things are going, how do you think, where do you think we are with AI? Do you view it in a very utopian way or dystopian way or a bit of both? Just give us some thoughts on how you view this moment we're at in terms of AI. You can apply it to Ericsson and telecoms if you want, or more broadly, whatever you want.
Well, I mean, let me speak about this a little bit on the broader perspective. So the way that I personally look at AI is a revolution, like similar to other revolutions that we had with the machines over the hundreds of years, like, past. Is like the Industrial Revolution, how we basically got the machines to, like, in agriculture, in manufacturing. So that actually was a work or labor done by humans, replaced by mechanical machines.
Indeed.
And then you move to computing and the rise of personal computers. And then personal computers has actually started to take over some of what we were doing before. I have a very interesting graph that I used to have in some of my webinars and seminars as well. And like it's quite a nice one. It was coming from the U.S. Bureau of Statistics, showing the development of the typewriter jobs between 1970s till the 1980s. Typewriters, the mechanical typewriters, versus the growth of the graphic designers in the same era. Mm-hmm. I mean, obviously, the mechanical typewriter job just faded away.
Yeah.
And that was replaced by other jobs like, graphic designer. And when you see the gap between the decline and the growth, it's actually a net add.
Yes.
This net add kind of thing.
And the world's population has obviously been booming in that time. And
absolutely.
Yet a lot of people have still got jobs.
And probably because aliens were resilient in this story, we as humans, we're quite resilient dealing with this kind of machine interaction. So I would personally, on a broader sense, think about AI in this way as just another general purpose technology that we will take our time to adjust how to use it, how to integrate in our workforce, and then we evolve into new types of labor, with new types of jobs. That will basically be around the net addition.
So my biggest pushback on that point of view, which is perfectly valid, and you're right, history, certainly since the Industrial Revolution and arguably before, there's always been technology, there's always been progress. And we mustn't lose sight of the fact that technological progress tends to, with the exception of things like, I don't know, nuclear weapons or whatever, tends to enrich humanity. It tends to raise people out of poverty and all that sort of thing. But this feels like, and this could just me being very ahistorical, this feels like the first time a technology's come along that doesn't just augment human capacity, but seems to replace just larger tranches of labour. So obviously, you could have the Industrial Revolution and certain sort of agricultural development industries were massively overhauled, and textiles and all that sort of thing, and then you get forms of power that render, that mean that sometimes suddenly horses and oxes and shit, we don't need them anymore. But none of them seem to just get a human job and just go, nah, we don't need you for that anymore. We've got this covered. And you look at it, on one level, initially it was like white collar stuff. We're always fingers crossed it doesn't affect journalists. In principle, it could. I mean, I could speak to an LLM now and say, write 500 words on Ericsson's last quarterlies, and it could probably do a half decent job. I'd like to.
Factory machines really have replaced.
It definitely affects journalists.
So it definitely affects, and a whole bunch of other white collar jobs like, I don't know, paralegals or
for sure.
accountants or whatever, where you can automate this stuff. But then, as we spoke about in our first
job, I would say,
almost, almost. I suppose ultimately, you like to think there's a tranche of white collar job that's protected, that's to do with interacting with other human beings. So presumably, a lot of your job is chatting to customers or colleagues or whatever, and forming consensuses and forming relationships and all that sort of thing. And people still do business with people. Whether someone want to buy some of your clever stuff off a robot is another matter. Or maybe you are a robot. I mean, who fucking knows?
I am a human being.
All right, I'll take your word for it for now, but I'm keeping my eye on you. And then
make him drink a glass of water. Come on.
Yeah, exactly. But then there's, as we spoke about in the first part of the year, where we're talking about robotics. It's looking like a hell of a lot of this is going to come into what we call blue collar job, like more manual labour stuff. As you've got this smart robots, these smart sort of anthropomorphic robots doing human stuff. So that's the only way I push back on your perfectly reasonable point that progress happens and old jobs are made obsolete, but new jobs are created. This just feels like an inflection point. And when you've got people like Dario Amodei writing these essays going, you better watch out because the shit's about to hit the fan, to paraphrase him, it feels exceptional. Do you have any sympathy with that point of view of mine?
Well, it is exceptional in the sense is that where you actually think about replacement of labor. I mean, again, let's go back a little bit to history. I like history like you. So when we have the Industrial Revolution and the machines at the beginning, where like the human value, that the way that labor was actually creating value to the society was using physical power. So we were actually going to factories ourselves, collecting things, assembling them, like doing agriculture like with our hands. Machines actually started to replace this physical labor.
And
so we moved more into knowledge work. I mean, the threat that we have right now is that AI started to be more cognitive than what machines used to be before. So that's why we feel more threat. And that's 100% what I agree upon is that when you see someone who is basically sharing some of your cognitive abilities, you will probably feel the threat because it might be replaced from labor perspective. But at the same time, I still believe in the human. I'm a little bit into the optimistic side of the history here. Is that quite resilient enough that we will come up with new types of jobs and new capability, like new value add that we do in the society, probably next to the machine in this cognitive part. I don't know. I mean, I'm still into the philosophy part, and I can tell you, probably on the cognitive part, you might have a body, but on the emotional part, I mean, that's not there.
I think
so. The thing is, it's not just about the cognitive ability or the physical ability.
Some people are starting to befriend AI and use it as their mate.
Yeah, but that's never emotion. It's a little bit of, reasoning between different transformers and neural networks within an LLM.
I think his thing's it's not very original and it's quite self-serving.
Well, why do you think it's self-serving?
I mean, he's part of the group of AI doomsters, yeah? None of this is new.
No, he's not a doomster because he's a doomster. He's got massive skin in the game.
That's why he's a doomster.
Yeah,
why?
It implies that he's thinking
Sam Altman, Dario Amodei, who's the other one, Talbesis from DeepMind, Elon Musk's another one. Ever since all of this stuff started, they've always come out with these arguments about, we need to be very worried about AI because it's so powerful it could eventually replace the human race. Why would they do something like that? Because it completely distracts, it hypes it up. That if you look at research, if you come out with these kinds of comments about AI so powerful it could take over the world, one thing it does is it actually makes it drives up the stock price of these companies. It makes people use it more. It makes people more interested in it. If you don't go the doomster route and you go, let's have a look at the day-to-day application of AI and what are some of the concerns to do with hallucinations or some of these models being being racist, people people then start to worry about it more because they then look at it on a day-to-day sort of practical level, or maybe it's replacing some white-collar jobs, or maybe it's doing that. But if you come out with it's the Terminator, counterintuitively, it actually makes people more excited about it. And that's exactly what Dario Amadei's been doing since the whole thing came along. And he's written stuff like that before. This is not new.
Yeah, well, he does refer back...
comes great responsibility and all this.
He does refer back to a previous essay of his own.
I think they're just implying that their product is going to be massively adopted. Like, it's a given.
Yeah.
So...
yeah, and that's interesting. I hadn't thought of it in the way that Ian just articulated, and that's a perfectly decent perspective.
I mean, that's not very original, me saying that. There's a lot of research showing that...
Well, this is where you get into some of the philosophical side of it, like what is original. You know, we're all just absorbing information from outside and processing it and regurgitating it to some degree. In fact, going full circle, that's where we hope, us journalists, that's where we still add value. Because while sometimes a journalist will get you something completely novel, like a scoop, something Ian's far better at than I am, generally what both of us do a lot of the time is assimilate stuff that's already in the public domain, but then analyse it and then serve it up in what is hopefully a useful and interesting and sometimes entertaining way. Like I wrote a piece this week where it's a minor story to do with EE connecting some remote Welsh village. And I had some fun with how much of a big deal they made about it.
Were they shaving people on top of Matt Snowden again?
No, they'd done a whole video. They'd interviewed all these local Welsh people, all saying how great it is because now they're not in the fucking Stone Age anymore, or whatever it is they were saying. Anyway, I just had a bit of fun writing it, and I had some people feed me back that they found it entertaining. So that's the value added there. I didn't necessarily say anything very clever, but for the 5 minutes it took someone to read it, they took some value from it.
Press conference when BT launched 5G standalone, and Mark Alera was there, and you asked him something about, so what we're going to use this for, shaving people remotely on the top of...
And he gave me a dirty look.
Because of the advert that they'd done, and he was not amused.
He wasn't laughing. Yeah.
But it was very funny.
We used to they had, E had an ad ages ago when, I mean, I don't need to explain to someone from Ericsson how desperately we've been trying to find a use for 5G for the last 10 years. And this was about 5 years ago, and they were going, it was back to, the low latency play, which has obviously been one of the biggest plays in 5G, and we had robotic surgery. In fact, this takes me back to another thing I had on the Ericsson stand, someone who now I think is a full-time employee of Ericsson called Misha Dola. He likes to wear a red leather jacket. And he was working at King's College at the time, but affiliated, I think, a project where he was collaborating with Ericsson. And I wrote something taking the piss out of 5G and just saying how robotic surgery is all bollocks. And and he was like, he saw it and just got in touch on LinkedIn, and he was really worried. He thought I was like really undermining his whole scenario. But that was what this EE ad was. It was similar to the robotic surgeries thing. It's like with 5G, you can go on the top of a mountain and have a robotic arm give you a shave. And we just would take the piss because obviously it's a use case. It's not something that's going to crop up very often. But anyway, that tangent, it all just came from me pointing out ways in which humans will hopefully still add value. And I take your point in about Dario Amadei. I do like to think of it, sometimes take it at face value. And what he seems to be talking about is, I'm just looking at his concluding paragraph. He goes, the first step is for those closest to the technology, i.e. him and his contemporaries, to simply tell the truth about the situation humanity is in, which I've always tried to do. I'm doing so more explicitly and with greater urgency in this essay. The next step will be convincing the world's thinkers, policymakers, companies and citizens of the imminence and overriding importance of this issue, which, I mean, a lot of it, again, I haven't read the whole essay.
I mean, they're quite hypical, some of these guys.
Well, it is a bit counterintuitive to write
They all
this
belong to this sort of community of effective altruists, who think they're kind of sort of do-gooders whose job is to go out and earn lots of money and then put it into causes they see
and use algorithms to allocate it
You get into quite dangerous territory of like, what's the most charitable cause? Like, it's better to give money to somebody who works in a first world country than somebody who works in an emerging market, because there'll be a follow-on effect. So it becomes quite, and he's part of that world. And they all started off, Sam Altman, him, Hassabis, wanting to keep AI out of the hands of like big corporations and do it from a kind of ethical perspective. This is the whole reason, like OpenAI started the way it did, as a kind of
which is why Musk's been getting the hump about that, hasn't he?
Yeah, but Musk originally had the hump because he tried to sort of finance DeepMind, and then that obviously they rejected that, and the idea was to try and stay. And then when they first got acquired by Google, they tried to set it up for it to be a kind of not a part of Google, but kind of had its own kind of board and had its own kind of ethics committee and all this stuff. And increasingly, these organisations have become more entangled with big tech and funded by big tech. And so this whole mission,
there's so much money in it.
This exactly, they had to.
Just this week, I was hearing about another $100 billion funding round for OpenAI.
Sure. So it was naive to think that perhaps they could do it without that. But that's what they tried to set themselves up to do originally. Is like we don't want it to be in the hands of big corporations because it's too big a deal for it to. For it to be controlled by a Microsoft or a Google,
indeed,
and yet they've all gone down that. And yet they've all gone down that route anyway. They've all ended up doing that. So
I quite like his final paragraph. Kind of bears out your critique. It's a bit melodramatic. I'm going to read it. He goes,
"No kidding."
Yeah, well, there we are. He goes, the years in front of us will be impossibly hard, asking more of us than we think we can give. But in my time as a researcher, leader, and citizen, I've seen enough courage and nobility to believe that we can win, that when put in the darkest circumstances, humanity has a way of gathering, seemingly at the last minute, the strength and wisdom needed to prevail. We have no time to lose.
I mean,
it's a bit dramatic.
They're all big-brained people, obviously, but
I'm still not sure what he's asking us to do. Anyway,
I think he's just trying to drum up some excitement.
No, you could well be right. I think that's a totally valid point. One other thing before I move on from that. When we're talking beforehand, and I mentioned this essay to you, Ibrahim, and you mentioned a couple of other things that you've heard some of these AI bigwigs talk about, and I think you mentioned Elon Musk talking about universal basic income and that sort of thing. When I've heard about you, and this is based on the premise of sort of AI fueled abundance and how there'll just be more than enough of everything to go by. Which I think the history of technological development, while it has elevated poverty levels to a certain degree, there's still obviously massive wealth imbalance around the world. I don't need to tell you, you're from a continent that tends to be on the wrong end of that ledger. So it doesn't necessarily stand to reason that the whole world is going to be elevated by this. But then the universal basic income, which is the concept that I don't need to write stories and do podcasts and answer emails in order for Informer to give me my money, and I'll just get the money from somewhere just because there's a shitload of it about. They don't know what to do with all the cash that's swinging around. There's two reasons why I struggle with that. Well, three, actually. One is that, and I've heard this, I think, on Rogan, them talk about it, I think, or some podcasts. I listen to so many, I lose count. I think people do need to work. I think people need a reason to get out of bed in the morning. And if you don't, some people will probably do poetry and write classical music and invent stuff. Other people, not necessarily me, but maybe me, would just think, fuck it, I might as well get pissed all day. So there's that danger with not giving people a purpose and a reason to get out of bed in the morning. Then there's the...
people find a way to do that anyway.
Well, maybe or maybe not. But, I always remember certainly needing to earn a living and certainly having kids, I'm sure, has made me a more structured, more grown-up person, knowing that I've got these other people dependent on me and I can't just be a complete fucking waster. I'm not saying I necessarily would have been, but I can see that possible inflection point if I hadn't had kids.
But to think that you need the UBI anyway, you'd have to sort of buy into the AI story that it's going to kill all jobs.
Yeah, and then my two other pushbacks on it are well, one is just inflationary. When you just sort of create money. This is, I mean, the two are linked. As far as I'm concerned, like I was saying to you before, Ibrahim, as far as I'm concerned, money is just a form of liquid labour. You provide your labour, your employer gives you money, and then you spend that money on someone else's labour in the form of goods and services and whatever. Some of it doesn't necessarily directly map like that, like certain assets like houses or whatever. But on the whole, I'll stick with that for the sake of argument. When it stops being tied to labour, I've got an issue with that, but maybe that's just a failure of my imagination. And then I also imagine it could just be inflationary because it feels like printing money. So I don't know. We got halfway through talking about this before we started recording. What do you think about the whole UBI concept and this abundance?
Well, I would say from a personal angle. So it's more on the promise that AI will be able to replace every kind of labor that humans actually can contribute to in the society, right? And for this, I might have different opinion, because I believe that there will be jobs to be replaced, similar to what machine actually have replaced before, but there will be new jobs being created. And the thing is, if you think about it a little bit, you said that money is basically kind of liquid labor, right? But the thing is, money is actually a representation of wealth. But actually, what is wealth? So wealth is basically the kind of value that you create from assets and something that you add to society, which is basically, we all value that. So we all value the work, the time that we spend together, like, doing a certain task. So that's why, like, you get paid for it. But then we will value something else as a society. So think about money itself. Let me give you an example. I mean, like, Bitcoin was not really a thing 20 years ago. But what actually gave Bitcoin the value is that there is a belief in the society that this token is valuable. It represents an accumulation of wealth.
Yeah.
That's the thing. So the way that we represent wealth, we redefine money, will be different in this age.
Fair enough.
So the thing is that, okay, maybe when this is going to happen, like, will AI will basically be able enough to react in this kind of physical world that we are working on? I mean, we were just mentioning about hallucination and basically, like, the shortcomings that we see right now from LLMs. And there are also a lot of debates about what kind of reasoning capabilities that we can depend upon.
Totally.
And if I take this to the network domain, and then we start to say, like, okay, GenAI, how GenAI is going to change that? I mean, like, you need to make sure that GenAI is behaving in the right way, giving you the right reasoning, controlling the right workflow, so you don't end up messing up, like, a national infrastructure like a mobile network, right? So where is this time? So that's a lot of work actually to reach this area.
Yeah,
but
totally.
The definition of money, the definition of wealth, the definition of the value that we create to society is going to be different.
I would have thought one of the concerns on the network side is, like, I guess a skills level. I think we were talking about this a bit before, but you have AI that can make recommendations, and then maybe you leave some decision making to the AI, and at some point there's not that many people left in the loop at all, but you sort of lose those fundamental skills and understanding about the foundational stuff that does
correct.
this in the first place.
Correct.
And it doesn't get replaced. And I mean, you hear stories nowadays about people being pulled out of retirement to go and fix old frame relay systems, or that still, for some reason, need maintaining, or whatever it might be. And, that seems to be more of an issue.
Go back to your previous career and get your hands dirty.
But I do wonder, like with AI and this sort of, there's so much abstraction between the core sort of scientific principles, if you like, and the core engineering muscle. And once you allow most of that to be done by the AI, there aren't really that many people left who actually understand the nitty-gritty of what went into this technology in the first place. And that's great if the AI is sort of infallible and it's not going to make any mistakes and nothing's going to go wrong. But yeah.
But I think, okay, I don't know. I use a little bit this example with my kids when they actually start to talk a little bit about, calculators, right? I mean, like, we use calculator, but you don't really lose the basics of math. You can still do 1 plus 1 and 2 plus 2.
But I wonder if I do wonder if people were better at it in the in the 1800s or something. You see traders at fish markets or something, and they do these
bookies.
Bookies. They do things really quickly in their heads because they're having to do it on a day-to-day basis.
But that's how civilization accumulate knowledge.
Yeah.
I mean, like, again, a little bit into the philosophy part, but this is how we human beings, we actually kept accumulating knowledge, is that you need to abstract what is below, like, in the basic level, but so you can build something, a new knowledge on top. Yeah. And this will continue. The thing is, you still have people right now, I mean, like, who can understand fundamental math, right? And they can basically have abstraction on the very low level numerically when it comes even to computing, when it comes to mathematics, if we're still like along this line, right? It's the same thing that we have also in networks. I mean, think about this kind of transformation. Like the people that actually right now, for example, remember I told you that we also have responsibility in my unit for services. Yep. And like what kind of people, what I call services business is built on wisdom of people.
Yeah.
Right.
So like
and interactions and relationships.
Exactly. This one will not go away. But the thing is, you equip these people with an AI technology to help them. Right, and when you equip them with this kind of capability, you need to have a different competence profile. That's what we call. You need people who can actually deal with the machine. Go 20 years ago, and like what kind of optimization engineer that you used to have in the network, that's a completely different profile that what we have today. We need people who can understand autonomy, who can understand machine learning. You know, if there is let's say a reinforcement learning model that is being trained in the network and then it is misbehaving, they need to understand how it really works. Yeah. So this is the kind of profile that we have now. So and a little bit you think about it, okay, when a replacement and you hear, okay, you don't really hire new people in because the repetitive tasks are being taken care by the machine. On a personal note, I actually dismiss that, because this is the way that you accumulate institutional knowledge, because you need to mix the seniority and knowledge with the freshness of the mind and the innovation spirit that you will get from new generation.
Totally, and I think
this one.
I think Ian's point was that we've got to be careful not to allow that institutional knowledge to atrophy, and I suppose not treat AI as too much of a crutch, just like when my kids were doing maths GCSE, they had calculator and non-calculator papers. Yeah. Because they still want to be able to make sure they can do some mental arithmetic. In fact, on the pod last week, I made a tit of myself by fucking up some mental arithmetic. I eventually got there, but it took me a little while to work out 15% or something, which is a bit tragic.
It's a bit like if you were time traveled to like the 1700s and said, oh, in my time, we don't need horses anymore. We have these things called cars. And they would tell you, okay, build one. How would you you'd be like, well, other people do that. So then in the future, are we going to say the same thing about AI? Well, I don't know how to do anything.
Exactly. So it, as you're saying, there's these abstraction layers, but there's the worry that if you look at it in a sort of sedimentary way, that the lower layers will eventually just become lost, and they're entirely absorbed by the abstraction, and no one knows how to drill down to torture the metaphor.
I would say not lost. They will be archived. An archival. You can always retrieve.
Well, let's make sure someone does that. Listen,
on paper, please.
I want to move it on. I'm pleased.
If there's a bad solar flare, we can wipe everything.
It's true, on paper.
On this podcast.
Although we don't need to ask an Egyptian what can happen to big libraries.
Yeah.
What was I going to say?
Lighthouses.
Lighthouses. Let me take this opportunity to once more thank the sponsors of this podcast, Cohere Technologies, which is the innovator behind the Universal Spectrum Multiplier software for 4G and 5G, and Pulsone technology for 5G and 6G coexistence, ISAC and NTN. Nice one. I want to move it on because we haven't got much time left, and I'm pleased Ibrahim did a lot of talking, because I've got a feeling he's not going to do much talking in our final segment. You happen, and you can blame Carl for this, you happen to have coincided your appearance on the podcast with your big rivals, quarterly, Nokia that is, quarterly earnings, and we can't end without talking about that. So me and Ian are going to bang on about it. Feel free to pipe up if you want, but I'll completely understand if you decide it's sort of diplomatically expedient for you not to. Ian, why don't I just throw it at you, unless you're tied up. Why don't you give us your top line on how you covered Nokia's quarterlies this week? Yeah,
they were a bit underwhelming, I think. I tend to look at the whole year when they do the fourth quarter rather than just the fourth quarter. And I think they had quite a good last quarter of the year, and a lot of the coverage, I think, was actually linked to AI boom. I mean, they're quite different from Ericsson, obviously, as a company, because they are not only involved in RAN and core sort of the mobile core and some other things that Ericsson does as well, but they do like optical technologies and fixed broadband. And I mean, they're pretty much the only player of scale, I think, now, and on the sort of fibre-based sort of broadband access side of things. If you take out the Chinese companies, there's only really Nokia and like Calix and Adtran, and I don't really see anybody else there. So,
okay.
And then with the consolidation that's happened with them taking over Infinera last year, they only really face sort of Ciena in that market outside, a bunch of Chinese companies.
And so that market is the bit that they get really excited about, which is like connecting data centers.
So the nice story for them is with 5G having been in a bit of a slump, which I think it's come out of now. It's sort of flattened off, but it's gone down in terms of like RAN product sales over the last couple of years. It's gone down like fairly dramatically if you look at Del Oro and Omdia. And Nokia's not done particularly well anyway, because it's had a couple of big setbacks. It lost a big deal in the US with AT&T, obviously, as people sitting with us will know. And before that, it had lost a big deal a few years before that with Verizon. Like the US market is probably where the RAN kit makers make most of their profit.
Certainly where Ericsson makes most of its profit.
And it really has kind of like hurt it very badly. So, and at the same time, it's kind of, we've been going through this slump. So there's been all these questions about the kind of mobile side of things. And that's the bit that Justin Hotard, who's the new CEO, has kind of taken a sort of active involvement in trying to turn this around and do something fairly dramatic with that side of things. The bit that's like the happier story is the optical and the fixed. But I have to say, I was a bit sort of underwhelmed at some of the kind of. I mean, I think some of this came out of the Capital Markets Day, where their kind of forecasts for the growth of what they call network infrastructure are a bit like.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest thing that hit their share price, which was down at about 5% on the day.
Yeah, well, their forecasts are not. I mean, I think some of that should have been baked in the actual and
5% isn't that much.
The outlook for network infrastructure, well, they're down 18% since October, by the way, since they did their deal with NVIDIA. They're down 18%, but their outlook for network infrastructure, I think, is not as upbeat and bullish as I think some of the analyst community would like to see. And I think there's still a bit of a sense that they're kind of trying to play catch up with Ciena.
Right.
And the margins on that side of it are, again, they're kind of quite squeezed.
Oh, I didn't know.
They're not. I mean, it's not as bad as what's happened. Like mobile networks was not profitable for the first 9 months, and then I think managed to eke out like a sort of 2.2% operating margin, I think, for the full year. But I think if you look at the network infrastructure side of it, it's not. It's because they're spending quite a lot on dealing with the integration of Infinera,
right,
and they're investing in optical capabilities. It's not as profitable as you might expect.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. That's one of the things I took away from it, is that people were expecting more, and the way they're bigging it up as an opportunity, you expected numbers to match that hype. And then just looking at one slide.
So you took a snapshot as well from this report?
I did, yeah. So what I do.
So which one that you like compared to Ericsson?
Well, the one I'm going to refer to on this, which I thought was interesting, that they had one slide that was called 2026 Outlook and Long-Term KPIs. It was interesting by itself, actually, for a company to publish KPIs, because normally that's a sort of internal thing. But anyway, and they listed these KPIs, and the two that are associated with the network infrastructure bit was net sales growth, and they said 2025 actual was 8%. Target 6 to 8%. Well, that's a bit shit, isn't it?
For network infrastructure.
Yeah, and then the other one, let me quickly finish. The other KPI they mentioned for network infrastructure was operating margin, which 2025 actual was 9.5%, and their target's 13 to 17%, which is a little bit more of a stretch thing, and that's a bit more exciting. Anyway, what were you going to say?
Well, I mean, if you're talking about targets, the one thing is that they don't actually have targets for a lot of things. So they have a target for... they're very selective about their targets. They have a mobile networks target. I mean, the mobile networks, by the way, one thing we should say is that they're restructuring the business quite a lot to deal with some of the problems.
I've got a slide about that as well.
So they've had 4 business units, 4 business groups: network infrastructure, mobile networks, cloud services and software, and Nokia Technologies, which is the bit that does licensing.
The intellectual property bit.
And network infrastructure sort of takes care of itself. That's the optical, fixed, broadband, IP stuff. That's the growth opportunity. The others are being merged into one unit that's going to be called mobile infrastructure.
I'm going to have one more too.
It will be a lot more profitable because it will be able to sort of ride off the back of Nokia Technologies, which is like pure profit because they're the bit that kind of like is involved in patents licensing.
And a lot of that is their historical R&D
there's no real cost,
paying dividends.
They're just sort of taking the R&D that's been done by other bits of the group and kind of like monetizing it. So we'll kind of, if you're going to be a cynic, you could say that restructuring kind of hides some of the problems that they've got within mobile networks. But it will
by
also
giving them that more juicy, profitable bit.
Yeah, but it will also probably lead to job cuts. I mean, if there's one like trend that you'd say is similar between Ericsson and Nokia at the moment, I'd say they're both kind of like doing a lot of cost cutting and streamlining, and some of that's probably got to do with automation and AI to some extent, and some of it's probably a response to the.
It's so funny chatting about this stuff with two Ericsson people in the room.
Yeah, and I'm not expecting anybody else in the room to comment on it.
Yeah.
But I would say that's the. My sense is with Ericsson, it seems a little bit more. We can do this and still maintain sales at a really good level and still serve our customers.
Yeah.
And we can actually take advantage of some of these things that are coming. I'm not saying this just to be nice to Ericsson because they're here. Whereas you kind of feel with Nokia that they're sort of doing it because they have to do it. They have to find a way of taking cost out of the business. And if they don't do that, then they're going to end up, with losses. Basically, they're not. They're not very
they're a bit
profitable
cash flow squeezed, which in part explains the Nvidia move last year. On paper, they're in a great position in a way. With all due respect, Ericsson isn't with this.
Well, they should be, but it's not really.
Exactly, this is what I'm saying. On paper, that's why I'm referring to it on paper. But then in practice, realising that potential and realising the position it is probably quite expensive. And it's up for debate whether or not they've even now got the cash flow to fully realise that. So it's a tricky position. I'll tell you another thing I took from that. So I got a slide in which has got their recast financials into these new groups. And I was just reminded how much bigger mobile is the network infrastructure in terms of revenues.
Yeah, but that's mobile infrastructure. That's after they've merged it with technologies and cloud software and services.
Okay. So
it's not
prior to that, it wasn't.
So the mobile networks used to be their biggest group.
Yeah,
but it was overtaken by network infrastructure last year, and
now that they've done this,
it makes
bigger again.
$4 billion less in sales in 2025 than it did in 2019. Which I think is a consequence of market share losses, basically.
Right.
Partly to do with like shrinkage of the market, and partly to do with market share losses to Ericsson and Huawei.
And I think it's interesting that they still haven't found a replacement for Tommy Wheater as well.
I think, yeah, and there was some speculation about whether they'd announce somebody this week who would succeed him. But
for people listening who don't know, he used to run the mobile side.
He's not left
years.
that long ago, and you can speculate about the reasons for him leaving, but he's only just sort of gone. And you want to get the right person in. And I actually think Justin Hotard quite likes the idea of being in charge of that unit. That's like the big challenge for them, isn't it?
But that's not his core competence at all.
No, it isn't. That's very interesting that he doesn't come from that background at all. But the whole Nvidia tie-up, which is pretty much at the heart of their mobile strategy now, is very much driven by him, I think.
And of course, there's the what do we call it? I'm senile. What's the thing to do with the RAN that Nvidia's
AI RAN?
RAN.
But this is complete speculation. But I suspect if you went and talked to Tommy Wheato or some of the other guys that are in the mobile network side of things. I mean, I interviewed Tommy Wheato a year ago at Mobile World Congress, and he was very. He was expressing the same kind of skepticism that I hear telcos expressing today about whether you want to put GPUs at cell sites. To do and basically use that for your RAN compute.
Yes.
Is that the most efficient? Is that the most efficient way of doing it? Do you want to take a big punt on that at this stage? Or do you want? It's too early to go all in on that.
And we could speculate.
What they've done is gone all in on that.
Yeah, and we could speculate that's why he's gone.
Justin Hotard's gone all in on that. He's made a really big gamble, I think, on this Nvidia arrangement. I wrote a story on this actually earlier in the week, with sort of contrasting with what Nokia's doing is what Ericsson's doing.
Indeed.
Because Boye Ekem, I was quite surprised.
It's not your part of business. We won't ask you about it.
I was quite surprised Boye Ekem got asked about it during the earnings call by an equity analyst, because they don't normally ask those questions. He's like, "What's your silicon strategy strategy at the moment. I was going to ask Per Narving this, thinking I was like going to be the only person who asked this question, but it had sort of been taken away from me by this guy at Deutsche Bank. He went, "What's your kind of approach on the Nvidia like AI RAN side of things? Are you going to do a deal like Nokia's done?"
What did he say?
He said their strategy is all about disaggregation of hardware and software, and to have like a software stack that will work on multiple like hardware platforms. Basically, that's why before we started the podcast, we were talking about AnyChip, which I invented that word. It's like
AnyChip.
An AnyChip strategy sort of thing.
Yeah.
But that's the
so that's sort of hedging your bets, whereas Nokia seems to gain.
It's not hedging your bets if you can do it. If you can actually do that and like achieve like sort of that complete virtualization and have something that you don't really have to adapt very much to work on lots of different things, then that's great. But how achievable is it? I guess in a way they're hedging. They're being more cautious about whether they. But I think Nokia probably had fewer options left to it. Yeah, they had to make a big punt. They got $1 billion from Nvidia. It's now the second biggest shareholder. I mean, that only means it's got 3% because it's like
most of it's Finnish government or something.
Finnish they wouldn't be classed as government, but it's
some kind of sovereign scenario.
Yeah, but I think he had to come in and do something, because all this speculation about investors are asking, why have you even got mobile infrastructure anymore? You know, like it's not making any money, and why is this a good business to be in? He had to do something quite dramatic.
But it is making money.
And
it's just
not making very much money. Is it?
It's making, well, again, this is the recasting, and I take your point about how they've thrown in much more profitable.
You're looking at what they've done with it when they put Nokia Technologies in the mix.
But even before then, I mean, there is plenty of money there.
It's 2% operating margin.
Kind of counting on there being plenty of market.
2% operating margin.
Yeah.
That's not a lot of.
Is that all it is?
2.2% was the mobile network's operating margin, I think, at the end of last year.
Pretty sure Ericsson does better than that.
Ericsson, if you like do all the adjustments for adjustments, they're on sort of more like 9 or 10%.
That's what I was right at the top of my thing. I adjusted for adjustments.
Yeah. So
okay. So
I think the 2%. I think but it's very low. They were unprofitable for the first 9 months of the year. Their R&D spending, by the way, if you look at what Ericsson's done under Boye Echo, where it's gone up from like not very much under Hans Vestberg, it's almost doubled. The annual spending is almost doubled. Nokia's has been like that, and they've had to cut mobile.
Exactly. Again, that reiterates my point about cash flow. You know, they've got all this potential. They're one of, in many markets, 2 radio players.
Yeah.
They're one of, in many markets, 2 players in certain types of fixed connectivity. So they've got all the potential there, but they just need a bit more cash.
The good news for them is, like, loads of other people are dropping out of RAN, and the EU's trying to ban Huawei, and Donald Trump's taking a massive interest in Latin America.
And you led with that in your story. You led with Hotard banging on about Huawei again.
I mean, it's not surprising why he's been more outspoken about the Huawei topic than Ericsson has, because of some of the business pressure that Huawei's causing for Nokia. In that part of the business is in a much worse condition than Ericsson's business.
And you don't have to be a conspiracy theorist to see that he's looking to.
So he would benefit much more from a firm line against Huawei than Ericsson would, basically.
Yeah, well, in principle, they both benefit equally. Let's say Germany was forced to just.
I know, but what I mean is in terms of it making his business look like it's a sustainable business, whereas Ericsson's already looks like it's a sustainable business.
Yeah, and that was one of my takeaways actually from Ericsson's quarterlies, is because it's done such a good job of streamlining, its underlying numbers are quite healthy, and it could back to the programmable networks and all that sort of thing. I think that was my conclusion. I think I'll read it back. I said my final sentence was, this financial good health will allow Ericsson to be patient about the 5G related boom it still believes is inevitable. That's what I wrote. And so I guess it's a story of cash flow. Ian's just drunk his Blue Moon.
There's something weird at the bottom of it, like
shit, was there some sediment?
Yeah.
It could have been one of those beers we had in here for ages.
Really?
Well, with that natural pause, I think obviously...
So I'll probably die afterwards, is that what you're saying?
You're welcome to comment on that Nokia stuff. I suspect you won't. But it's an interesting place, and it's just a coincidence that you happened to come in. Although it wouldn't necessarily have been any less awkward for you if you come in a week earlier and we were talking about Ericsson's quarterlies, because then we would have had to ask you direct questions about them.
I mean, you had it on Friday, last week, right?
Yeah,
23rd
exactly.
in the morning, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, just to go full circle, and then we'll wrap up because we're running out of time. I suppose that the broad thing, without making it specific to either company, is just the fortunes of the mobile networking industry on the whole. I think we've said on recent podcasts, yes, it's not very high growth. Obviously, Ericsson's forecasts are not for high growth. I know it leans heavily on numbers from Dell'Oro, and they're not high growth. But it is still a massive market, and it's still a really interesting market. And I reflect on that, having fallen into this. I'm not like you, where I got trained up like a proper engineer and all that sort of thing. I just fell into this as a journalist. But I still think it's a really interesting market, and I try and look past growth numbers, because we get these silly growth numbers associated with, companies like Nvidia and SanDisk and that at the moment, which you're obviously not going to get with operators or vendors in the telecoms market. But it's still really big. It's still really important. I take what I think your colleague Per Narvinger told me recently about how in the AI era, connectivity is arguably going to be more important than ever, especially if we're starting to talk about physical AI, Ian, and robots and all that sort of thing. I mean, they've ideally got to be connected. We don't want those fuckers just running around not where we're not connected to them, and they're just making up their own mind about stuff. So, but it is interesting, with every passing year, we're at 2026 now. We're in the sort of middle of the 5G cycle, and it hasn't set anyone's world on fire in terms of revenue growth and that sort of thing. And I guess everyone just does have to be patient, and it'll be interesting. And I presumably we'll hear from companies like Ericsson first and foremost when really novel, interesting, new sort of growth opportunities do come up. But yes, before we call it a day, do you have any last closing thoughts on the part of the world you exist in and anything we discussed today?
Well, I mean, I think we spent some good time actually today. I mean, we went a little bit deeper on the technical side, and that's it's a very good discussion. Yeah, and then the AI future and how the world would look like with AI. I mean, I'm very happy actually that we went through that. It's an important thing. I mean, I would say the AI, the thing about AI is that it's not just about the technology itself. It's actually how to transfer. If you think about telco specifically now, it's not about making the technology available, because the technology is now available. It's about the transformation of how ways of working, how the way that we actually tackle network problems is different. Compared to what used to be before. And at the same time, AI, what we have seen in the telco is not just about OpEx efficiency, it's also about improving user experience. The question comes that, how you basically connect the user experience to a monetization opportunity or a growth opportunity. And that's
still not obvious to me.
Yeah, and that's I would say, something that we as an industry should have done better. Copying best practices, for example. I mean, there are operators in different parts of the world. They actually have examples of how they monetize such kind of differentiated connectivity. But we are not really good as an industry, I would say.
So an area I think you've worked in a fair bit is Middle East, and some of the operators there actually seem quite innovative. It seems to be a part of the world where there's quite a lot, and Turkey for that matter, where there's quite a lot of innovation going on there.
I mean, I was in Middle East, Turkey, and Thailand, in Asia, and then so the thing is that there are different levels of innovation. And it's not just about how you introduce an offering in the market, basically from a service provider, but it's also about what kind of operation that you put behind. I mean, there are some operators who are quite innovative. Is in order to make sure that this is profitable, even if I don't increase the price, I make sure that it is running at a cost efficiently, as lean as possible. That's one thing. And then the other thing is that maybe this differentiation could happen with an extra package or extra story that I was just mentioning, something like that, like FWA, for example, where it was an opportunity. So this kind of innovation is very much varying between different operators. Okay. We should do better, I think, on the industry level, that we copy this kind of best practices and make it more, more available.
Cool.
Yep.
Well, thanks a lot for coming over from Malaga. I bet the weather's a bit better in Malaga than it is here right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think I brought the sun with me. I mean, so
today was a relatively unshit day for late January UK.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fantastic city. I love the weather there, and I'm glad actually that you hosted me here in London.
So thanks a lot for coming in, and we won't forget all this lovely
They survived 2 flights. So like,
right.
Yeah.
It looks pristine. I wouldn't guess it had been in your luggage.
No, I mean, like, I have to take care of that, right? So
Okay, well, it's great to meet you, Ibrahim. Thanks a lot for coming on.
Thank you.
And it's great chat. And if you haven't got to fly off, maybe we'll get you to have a pint with us in the pub after.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Cheers.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we might be recording 2 next week. I'm not sure. Anyway, but we've definitely got a bit of a crowded schedule of podcasts coming up. So thanks for listening to this one, and look forward to the next one.